Livermore from Vimora, and I'm here with Jay Arbetman from the Sourcing District. Jay, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jay Arbetman from the Sourcing District, and I'm here in Oak Park, Illinois, where my office and showroom is, and ready to talk about fabrics with you, Anna.
Yeah, so today we're doing the Fabric 101, and I always ask you last minute to pop on these things, and you always say yes. So thank you so much for being
Anytime.
here. But you're just such a great resource. When I'm working with designers, they can be a little bit intimidated to call fabric reps if they don't have the right questions. And I always tell them no, call Jay. I hope that's okay. I'm no, call Jay. He'll be totally fine. He'll answer your questions. Not all fabric reps are like that, for sure. So
that's what I hear.
What?
That's what I hear, that not all fabric reps are like that.
So I really appreciate that you're willing to work with newbie designers and you're patient enough to answer their questions and run them through the things that they need to know. But I put together this Fabrics 101 for maybe those fabric reps that aren't so welcoming to the green new designers. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was, what do they need to know in regards to the construction and fibers of the fabrics?
Sure. So just in construction, in some real general ways, Anna, there are three big categories. Mm-hmm. Woven fabrics, which are, there's a warp and a fill, there's an over and under type of construction. Knitted fabrics, which are
what if we don't know what that is?
What?
What if we don't know what that is? Warp and weft.
That's the long way. The length of the fabric is the warp, and the weft is going across the fabric.
Yes, good.
Now that's actually important to know, because there are now there's always new developments, as we know. And so now there are actually some designing that you can do with woven fabrics, where they can give you three different fabrics as long as they have a common warp. So it's important to understand that. So you could have a stripe, a plaid, and a yarn dyed solid, for example, made in the same fabric because it has a common warp. So it's important to know that. And so, knitting it's made with needles, either by hand or by machine. And it's basically a series of knots. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Now, and then there's non-woven fabrics.
Yes.
And those are fibers that are compressed with heat and pressure. And you'll see that felt on a pool table is a great example.
Yeah.
We all know what that is. That's a non-woven fabric.
There's not a whole lot of non-woven, right? I mean, I guess vinyl would be a non-woven.
Interfacing.
Not
all, but some interfacing is non-woven.
Yeah.
Things like batting is considered a non-woven.
Okay.
And there's some of the, when we were looking at a lot of PPE, there was a lot of barrier fabrics that were non-wovens.
Got it. And I guess vinyl could be either, right?
It can be. It can be.
Polyurethane, it would be the non-wovens.
Right.
And then
can be.
Knits and non-wovens, or wovens and non-wovens and knits, like denim.
Yeah.
What is that?
So denim is a twill weave. It's woven and by definition in a twill weave with an indigo dye.
Got it.
And so you can always identify denim. Now things change. So Anna and I have known each other for about 15 years. And in that 15 years, there have been amazing changes in the fabric world. So now you can actually buy cellulose denim or lyocell denim, or you might call it, the brand name is Tencel denim, or hemp denim. So there are now other fibers other than just cotton that are being used to create denim, but it always is in a 12 weave with indigo dye.
Got it. So the definition of denim would be twill weave with indigo dye, but it can be made with cotton, or now they can make it with hemp
and cellulose, different cellulose fibers, right?
Got it. Interesting.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah. And I just have some different weaves. We have the plain weave.
Sure, that's just a plain weave is just what's called a 1x1. So it goes over and under and over, and that is like a poplin or a broadcloth are usually plain weaves. That would be a good example of plain weaves.
So it's 1 over 1 under, 1 over 1 under.
That's correct.
Got it. And then the satin weave. I mean, that one's easy.
Satin weave is what makes it shiny is that instead of going 1 over 1 under, it might go 1 under. It might go 1 under 4 over. So it creates more surface and more luminance happens because of that, because it's created more of a consistent surface.
Yeah.
So there are different kinds of satin. There's a 4 harness satin, a 3 harness satin. So different types of satin. Satins can be made out of silk. That's the classic way they're made. They can certainly be made out of polyester. They can be made out of rayon. They can be made out of acetate. They can be made out of a number of different fibers, but they all have that same woven construction.
Great. And that's why they can pull too. Like the threads get caught easier because they're more exposed.
Sure. I mean, I don't sew. I know you do, but
not a long time, but I did.
But satins, I guess, are a little more difficult to sew than a plain weave.
They're slippery, yeah. So those are all the weaves that I have, basically. Can you think of any other weaves?
Sure. So there's what's called an Oxford, which is like a 2x2 weave. If you kind of understand again that over and under thing, a 2x2 weave, and you see that commonly in men's shirts, just for example.
Okay.
But Oxford's generally made out of cotton. It can be made out of cotton poly. You can actually have nylon Oxford or tencel Oxford. More and more, you're seeing different fibers used in ways that we wouldn't have seen them 15 years ago.
Yeah.
You went to buy a poplin fabric 15 years ago. It was just going to be a pretty flat thing, and it was going to be cotton or polycotton or cotton poly 99% of the time. Today, it can be tencel, it can be modal, it can be so many other products. And of course, the other thing that we're seeing, Anna, that's I know you're probably going to get to fibers in another second, but is how much of these things can also be recycled.
We actually don't have. Let's try and fit that in though, about the sustainability factor and how we can recycle and what fibers can be recycled easiest. That would be amazing if you could touch on that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So with weaves, and then we have knits. Do you want to? I'll tell you which ones I have. You can kind of. Well, actually, I have a question. How important is it when asking for wovens to know what kind of weave it is? Do you think that's general knowledge that everyone should know?
Here's what I believe in, and I try to get people to do.
Yeah.
I think at the beginning, when you're not buying anything much, you want to get a lot of color cards in front of you. Now you have to have some, companies aren't going to send you 30 color cards, but if you're going to make a shirting, then I would look at, I can think of, a good 15 different color cards that I'd like to have in front of me before I made a decision.
Right.
If I was going to make something in gingham, there's tencel gingham, there's cotton ginghams of different qualities, there's different size boxes in gingham. So I'd want to get a lot in front of me. So I think of it as a pyramid. When you're at the bottom of the pyramid and you're just looking at color cards, you want to get a lot in front of you. And as you start sampling things, you want to narrow things down a bit.
Yeah, it makes sense. I always tell my clients, you want to have a open mind when you're sourcing the fabrics, because if you go in too specific, it can make your fabric sourcing really difficult and sometimes impossible and last way longer than you'll ever want it to. So going in with kind of an
You
open
don't
mind.
want to look,
Yeah.
right. You don't want to look for the holy grail of fabric because you're probably not going to find it. And one of the things, if you're going to do your sewing in North America, which most people who are going to listen to this are likely to do, you want to make sure you're buying fabric that has continuity, that has quality and real wholesale pricing. And so those qualities that you need, that's going to limit. You can't just go to the store and buy fabric because you can't go back there and buy it in 6 months.
Yeah.
So that's what continuity is all about.
Yeah, I just did my 10 mistakes new designers make, and that's number one.
It is absolutely the number one. And I've got an article on my blog. The number one mistake designers make is they go to the store. Don't go to the store.
Buy retail fabrics for wholesale products.
Right. You want to make yourself a dress, or you're going to sew something for a friend.
Fine.
Great.
Yeah.
But that's when you're going to work commercially, you have to buy your fabric commercially.
Yeah.
And so that's, very, very important. Again, getting there. Now, one really good piece of news, while it's true that you're looking at a closed set of fabrics to choose from, the good news is in that 15 years you and I have known each other, you had about this many fabrics to choose from 15 years ago. And now you have thousands and thousands of fabrics to choose from. And while you can't get every single thing imaginable, you can get an awful lot of good product. And there much more is available. And the quality of what is available is, I think, of a higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. The industry used to be just set up for large designers, pretty much.
Right.
And then now there's been so many independent designers, and there's been more need for the smaller minimums that, factories that used to just do large minimums work with large designers are calling me to be like, I'm trying to figure out how to work with smaller designers. So it's really changed a lot.
And the reason fabric companies have done this is because they can make money on those people. They're not doing it to be nice.
Yeah.
But the lines I have tend to have 5 to 10 yard minimums. That's not uncommon. You're going to probably run into other good suppliers that are similar and that want your business. You got to go somewhere where they want your business.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So the knits I have: jersey knit, interlock knit, ITY knit, Ponte knit, rib knit, French terry. You want to touch on each one of those?
You missed one.
I put fleece this with you again because I was like, I know that it's probably needs some updating.
Right. So jersey is the most common fashion fabric, knitted fashion fabric.
Yeah.
And it comes in. You can get polyester jersey, you can get rayon jersey, you can get cotton jersey, you can get almost any wool jersey. You can get almost anything that's made in a jersey knit. And also it comes in weights from 100 GSM to 300 GSM. So it comes from a weight that you'd use for a very lightweight blouse, for example, all the way up to something you may use for a jacket or a sweater.
What would be like an example of a weight for a t-shirt?
About 150 GSM.
Okay. And then I'm trying to think of like a heavyweight jacket.
So when you start to get up over 280 and up, that's when you're starting to look at heavier. The one thing that has happened, been a development, is that I have a lot of fabrics at 300. Some people come looking for 400, and I think I have one or two things like that. But because of the price of freight, though, you get to a certain point, and the value starts to fall out of the bottom of the fabrics.
Yeah,
if they get too heavy. So that's just something to think about as you go along.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense.
The 200, for example, 200 GSM, which is 5.9 ounces per square yard. That is a very versatile weight. You can make tees, you can make tops, you can make dresses.
Right.
It's a very versatile weight. There's a lot done at 240, 250 also. Again, very versatile.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. All right. So that's jersey. Interlock knit.
Interlock, we love interlock. Well, one of the best ways to explain interlock, wait, I was just looking at some of that. Let's see if I can pull it out of a pile real fast. I don't think I can. But sometimes if you'll see a reversible.
You've been a lot more organized over the years, Jay.
You know what? I just had somebody in here working. So usually I'd be able to reach out and grab it right away. But things are much more organized than they used to be. I've made massive improvements over the years.
Very proud of you. Very proud of you.
Thank you very much. But interlock, you'll see T-shirts that can be in interlock knits. So it can be that, but it also, sometimes you'll see a knit that is reversible. And that's basically two knits that have been put together.
Yeah.
And they're put together, so you'll see a content that might say 48% polyester, 48% merino wool, 4% nylon. That nylon's being used to hold the merino wool and the polyester together into one fabric. It's called a compound fabric.
Interesting. Now tell me about an ITY knit.
So that stands for intense twist yarn.
Intense.
And that can be, it ranges everywhere from breathtakingly horrendous when it's like 180, 200 GSM, it's under constructed, it's something I don't sell. And it's not going to have dimensional stability at all. But you get up.
Why would anyone use it then? Is it cheap?
Cheap.
Okay.
It's cheap. But there is ITY that's heavier, like 300 GSM, and it's okay. It's got a nicer feel. It's not going to shrink when you look at it or pill when you look at it. It's got better characteristics. So ITY can be a good fabric. A lot of times it's used for printing. That is not an unusual thing.
What is this used for? Yeah.
Right. And now, for example, I have white ITY that's well constructed and that people use for dye sublimation printing all the time.
Makes sense. Makes sense. All right. The next is the Ponte. I love a good Ponte.
I love Ponte. And I think that's those of us that work in the business, I think Ponte, if you almost think of a stretch woven, Ponte has more dimensional stability. So a jersey can be very, very springy, and a Ponte will have less. It has stretch, but it has less stretch, and it has more dimensional stability. Tends to really come to life in a heavier weight.
Yeah.
You'll see Pontes at 275, 300 that are really nice, but at 320, 350, they seem to take on. Now, the thing that a buyer has to look out for in Ponte is the lower end part of the Ponte is really what we used to call double knit. And you'll see what's called beret, lines that are across it. And in my world of Ponte, those are called damages. But in the cheap part of the market, those are acceptable. And I just don't think that's a great fabric. But the better Pontes, which are going to be $10 a yard plus, right? But they take color beautifully, and you're able to do a lot with them. You can make dresses, you can make bottoms out of them, you can make a suit out of them. You can. There are very clever Ponte prints that are out there. So I love Ponte.
Now, define what makes it a Ponte.
The way it is knitted doesn't leave as much what's called mechanical stretch. Best way in this case is to just show you really, really quickly what. So here's a whoops, find the right one here. There we go. So here's a jersey fabric, just a polyester jersey fabric, and
Pull it up higher.
you can see
Perfect.
that it has. So this has 8% spandex, but it has a lot of pull. So why does it have that stretch? Stretch comes from two ways. On it comes from fiber stretch, which can be lycra, spandex, elastane, stretchable nylon. All are stretchable fibers.
Yep.
Or it can come from construction also.
Mhm.
So sometimes you'll see knits that do not have any stretchable fibers in them. They're just polyester or recycled polyester, but they have a little mechanical stretch is what it's called.
Nice.
Ponte does the same thing. It does not. It has less. It has less stretch, not nearly as much. Almost think of it as like a little bit of a stretch suiting.
Yeah, and it holds shape really nicely.
And there's lots of characteristics. Here's another one that has such a great soft and polished hand to it. And you can see even when I'm pulling it pretty hard, it doesn't have a ton of stretch. And this one has 5% spandex. It's not really the spandex, it's the construction that makes it not as springy.
What vendor was that?
The second one was Kendor.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually get I have Ponte from 3 different suppliers.
Oh wow.
And they all have different characteristics. Now you're starting to see Ponte that's sustainable.
Okay.
Gordon Fabrics does a lot with that. So does Kendor. And then Sextet makes one that's made in the United States that is beautiful. So there's a lot out there for a buyer who's interested in that kind of fabric. There's a big selection, much more than there used to be.
That's great. That's great. All right, rib knit. It's pretty easy. I feel like
rib knits just have a ridge in them, and the way that ridge is measured is it can be a 2x1 or a 1x1, and that's a real narrow rib, or let's say an 8x8, which is going to have a very chunky look to it.
And so, this is like, for those that don't know, it's like the cuff of a sweatshirt or the neck band of a sweatshirt.
Yes, but people use them for dresses also. They use them for tops. They use them for shirting almost, or more tops. And so rib knits are pretty versatile. They tend to feature a pleasant hand, which I know you mentioned the word hand is something you wanted to go through, but the feel of them can be very nice because they've got a little cushingness to them. So ribs can be versatile. They can come in weights from 190 GSM on up to 500 GSM. You can have really big ribs.
Yeah.
And there's a lot. You'll see a lot of cowl necks can be in that, or even turtlenecks and mock turtles can be in rib knits.
Yeah. All right, and this last one, I feel like it's a little bit harder to find, but the French terry.
Yeah. So,
why is that?
Because it's hard to make.
Okay.
And it makes differently. So it used to be that Ponte was not everybody wanted to make it, and because you have to make it completely differently. So it's a different set of machinery.
Okay.
It's the same with French terry. Ponte just has a bigger market. I mean, frankly. Yeah. So even though it would seem, but French terry comes in a variety of weights. It comes from 200 GSM on up. The better stuff is going to be more like 250 to 300 GSM. Generally, it is like you'd say either heavy t-shirts or light sweatshirts. It's kind of an in-between weight.
Yeah.
Can obviously be used for all kinds of sportswear and dresses and so on. It does feature a pretty fair amount of spring to it. French terry, because the back of the fabric has a terry cloth feel to it.
Yeah.
And look.
All right. And then I missed one you said. Which
is fleece.
Oh, yeah.
Fleece. So fleece is very interestingly, there's some of the coolest stuff going on with fleece right now. a lot in recycled, a lot in sustainability of fleece that is just fantastic. And of course,
Oh,
like anything else that comes out that's new, there's a segment of that market that's very expensive and very exclusive. But we're starting to see. I've got a recycled cotton and recycled cellulose that's really amazing. It's lighter weight, but it's got a fleece back. It's a light fleece, and the price is really excellent. So you're starting to see some of it creep down in price a little bit.
nice.
But fleece, again, very versatile. I've had clients that have actually washed it, aside from the mill washing that it gets, washed it again to knock out any stretch that would be most of the stretch or most of the shrink, and then make very nice dresses out of it.
Oh,
Yeah, Kaya Tomlin in
oh yeah,
Pittsburgh
yeah,
does that.
yeah, yeah.
She does that. She does a lot of that, and does it really well. And there's others,
Nice.
but she works with fleece beautifully.
Okay, so that's kind of the breakdown between woven and non-woven and knits.
It is.
Is there anything else that you can think of to add?
You know, the only thing, here's a couple of things that I think when you're looking for fabric. So let's say you're going to make a shirt, a button-down shirt, where the parts of it aren't that big. So if you see a 44 or 45-inch fabric, it might be something you can consider, maybe.
Yeah.
But let's say you're going to make a dress that has a lot of sweep to it. Then a narrow fabric will make the dress either A, impossible, or B, just take a ton of fabric.
Yeah.
So understanding the width of different fabrics is really important. And so if you know that you're making dresses that are going to take a little bit of yardage, you want to make sure you're looking at preferably 57 and up. You'd probably be a little more expert on that than I would, but generally 56, 57. There are certain fabrics that it's hard to get over 52. They just don't exist that much. But those things that are under 40, you want to watch out for those, depending on what you're making.
Yeah.
So the width is one thing I would look at. I would also look at the way, this is something we didn't used to talk about, but today, let's say you're making your garments in Texas, just for example. So then you don't really have any local fabric people,
Right.
but you have to consider the freight, I guess is what I'm saying. So if you're making your things in New York, for example, or in the New York area, if you can find things on the East Coast that work for you, that might not give you everything, but if you can, then freight is going to make a big difference in the price. Now, I sell some lines that are shipped from the West Coast, and people all over the country buy them, but you certainly have to be aware of the fact that freight is a significant cost, much more than it used to be, as you know.
Yeah. I always will have, when we're doing the pricing, include the shipping. If it's $10 a yard, then we want to get an estimate for the shipping so that we can add that into the cost of goods, because sometimes a $10 a yard fabric will end up being $14 or $15 a yard. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
I just shipped. I just happened to look at the invoice. I just shipped 7 yards of fabric from the West Coast to a customer in Texas, and the freight on that 7 yards was $30.
Oh wow!
Now,
So
as you buy more, that price per yard goes way down.
Right.
So when you start buying rolls of fabric, you start buying 50 yards and 70 yards and 100 yards, then the price per yard comes way down. But when you're sampling fabric, freight is a very, very significant part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. All right. So now I wanted to get into fibers. And this part, it confuses me a little bit. So we have the natural fibers. Those are pretty straightforward. And then we have the man-made fibers. But I'm interested to hear you talk about the man-made fibers, because that's where, I don't know, for me, it gets a little confusing. But let's talk about the natural ones first, because those are easy.
So the naturals, your cotton, hemp, if you can grow it, in the ground. That's a natural.
Yeah.
And of course, cotton can come as organic cotton. It can come as conventional cotton. And now you're starting to see cotton that is recycled. And that happens in a couple of interesting ways. The good news about cotton is that it's very, very versatile. It can get dressed up. It can dress down. You can get wovens that are that have a polish to them, like a sateen.
Mhm.
So you can make something kind of dressy out of it.
Yeah.
And so, but usually they are a dense fiber, and what they won't do is unless they're treated, which is becoming less and less popular, they will not do much in the way of wicking.
Okay. Right.
So they won't be warmer in the summer, cooler in the winter.
Yeah.
I mean, the other way around. I meant that. And they don't necessarily dry quickly. Anybody who's had a dryer full of cotton towels knows about that.
Yeah.
They mildew, but they don't attract insects, and of course they're very comfortable. They can be very comfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they're natural fibers. They're doing a lot in the man-made realm that can't be done in the natural fibers.
So,
yeah.
So the
and then
man-maids.
we've got the animals.
Well, the animals, that's silk, wool, which is, really silk, wool. And then what are we used to call these precious fibers, Angora, cashmere, camel hair, alpaca are all examples of that. And of course, these are very, very luxurious fibers. They're very fine. They can be at their best, very fine.
Yeah.
Merino wool, which is for me something I sell pretty well.
Yeah.
And that can be done in a lot of different ways. I have one supplier that makes a merino wool boiled wool, so it's really lovely.
Okay.
And you can also, the other thing wool does really well is it combines with other fibers. So you can see a boucle made out of wool and polyester, and it can be very, very nice.
Yeah.
And of course, polyester will give it a little more strength and a little more durability.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the thing with the man-mades. It's strength, durability. You can wash it, you can wear it a bunch, but
right. So man-mades, when at their best, they're really wonderful. I mean, it's any of us who've been making a lot of garments that have used a lot of fabric over the years. Almost everybody's a wool fan because it can be done really beautifully. Yes, it can also be very rough and coarse, and there's different kinds of wools. But all of these have one thing in common: they all have a significant expense.
Right.
So wools tend to be expensive. The ones that aren't usually are not very nice, so you have to watch out for that. Some fabrics do better in cheap or expensive forms. They do all right, kind of sliding up and down the price scale.
Yeah.
These kind of fibers like silks and wools, I don't think they do well as cheap fabrics.
No.
Just my opinion.
But like even the price of cotton and linen has gone up so much.
So what's interesting is that now I'd say a lot of my most successful customers are making I sell all kinds of apparel fabrics. But I sell a lot to make women's apparel. And I would say that my customers going from 150 to 300 as a selling price, that's really popular. Yeah. And the kind of pricing that we have for labor, which is also going up, all these things are going up, but those fit into those price points. Of course, there's more of a challenge. You have to make something that looks great, but if you do, it will sell at those price points. Yeah. So yes, those things are going up. There are some clever, less expensive fabrics that can still look great. And if price point is something that's a big deal for you, you're just going to have to shop the market and have a little bit of flexibility, but you can find some things that are a little less money. and can be good, still good.
It's really important to like have your price point in mind when you're shopping for fabrics, because if I have someone that's like, well, I want to produce a product for $20 and it's going to be silk cotton, and I'm like, not possible. So like the price point in your fabrics, they have to line up. You've got to be aware of your costing and what a $20 yard fabric versus a $7 a yard fabric does to your bottom line.
So about the time that you started your business in 2008, which is when we first met, but I also, right about that time, someone came into where I was working and they said, I have a great idea. And I'm gonna make it very simple to understand. It was basically a really cheap cashmere sweater.
Yeah.
You know, just doesn't work, doesn't happen. And frankly, while price can be important in some things, you're not gonna cheap junk the big box retailers.
Right.
So generally, if you make a nicer product, it usually pays off.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, now tell us non-cellulosic versus the cellulosic.
Okay. So the first.
This is where I get confused.
Okay. I'm gonna unconfuse you.
Great.
The first man-made fiber was rayon. Now rayon is the raw product is wood pulp.
Okay.
That's what they take wood pulp and they pulverize it into a point where they can make a yarn out of it. There is something in, and it's made by what's called the rayon method. So, and that's the basis of cellulosic fabric. And those were created like in the 1890s. And I believe they were initially not called rayon. They were called mother-in-law silk.
But if it's made out of wood, isn't that a natural fiber?
Yeah, but it's man-made.
Okay.
Right. I agree with you. And so all of it, so rayon now has had this offshoot of sustainable fibers like lyocell, which brand name is Tencel. There's a company called Lenzing that makes a lot of fibers, and they make beautiful Model, Micromodel, Ecovero. These are all types of cellulosic fibers.
So what is the cellulosic? The definition is it's made from a wood pulp.
It's made from either wood, some kind of a wood product.
Okay.
It is. So and now in Europe they have forests of sustainably grown, sometimes beech wood and whatever it is that makes these different. There's certain woods that make Tencel or make and it's pretty proprietary. So the reason those have become sustainable is that they're made with something called a closed loop system. So when you make conventional rayon, I know this is getting a little out there. When you make conventional rayon, there is some toxicity that comes in contact with the fabric and is eventually has to be disposed of.
Okay.
But Lenzing invented this closed loop system that does not it recycles the toxicity. It recycles and purifies it as a way of filtering it. And there's nothing, it doesn't dispose of anything at the end. And they're all considered sustainable fibers, these ones from Lenzing that are different kinds. So a lot of times you'll see viscose that's made by Lenzing, which is a type of rayon. So they're all types of rayon. And they're made out of a cellular plants, a cellular material.
Okay. It just clicked. Cellulose.
Right. Like bamboo, even though it's not really sustainable, but bamboo is also made out of a plant.
Okay. Got it. So they're made out of a plant. Cellulose.
I'm glad I could help you with this.
I mean, it's only been 15 years or whatever, but.
Right.
Finally.
So then you have polyesters.
Right. So these are the non-cellulosic.
And
not made from things with cells.
And you have polyester and nylon that are basically all oil derivative.
Yeah.
So every one of us that ever took a textile class knows that you take the polyester fiber and you burn it and you get a little bead of oil on the end of it.
Yeah.
That's because it's made up of oil. That's what it is. Again, just kind of sliding back into the sustainable part of it, you're starting to see a lot of recycled polyester. So there is, in my business, sustainability has gone from being a very small part, 15%, to being more than half, and maybe much more than half. I mean, the fabrics that are really selling well, a lot in the cellulose area, and organic cottons are doing really well. But the cellulistic, the Tencels, Models, Ecoveros, that stuff is great. And the fabrics themselves are very pleasing to the hand. My understanding is they're production friendly in many cases. So that's really a great category to look in.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, so that's all I have for the fibers and the types of fabrics. I wanted to close with, what do people need to have prepared, or what questions do they need to have when they're calling a fabric vendor that might not be as patient as you?
Well, look, I think the one thing you want to have ready is, it sounds kind of funny, but you want to have your address and a credit card ready.
Yes.
Because so I represent two companies that are not in the United States. They're in Canada. So when you get color cards from them and you want to get those, you're going to pay for the transport.
Yeah.
That in itself
like
shouldn't bother you. It's 20, 25 bucks, because suppliers just don't like to put this stuff in the mail anymore. It takes a long time. So
labor, and it costs money. So yeah.
So this is the one. I wouldn't suggest throwing a lot of money around at the beginning necessarily on fabric, but to get a look at the best things, you may be paying for a little bit of transport. We're not talking about big money. Again, $15 to $25 usually on a pouch. That's about what it's going to be. Many domestic suppliers will send you color cards or swatches for free. It's not unusual at all. And some of them can be very generous with it.
But normally they need a shipping account number, right?
It's helpful.
Yeah.
It's helpful. I think a lot of them will put it in the mail, but not everybody will. So I would, again, my advice would be to be ready with an address, to be ready with a credit card, or with a shipping account, a UPS number, a FedEx number.
Yeah. Great. And then they'll call you and they say, I want to make t-shirts.
Right.
And that's it. That's all they need to know, what they're making, and that's it.
Yeah, I think you need to have some idea. You're making a luxury t-shirt. You want it to be heavy. You're going to print on it. So in my case, you call me up and say, I want to make t-shirts. I'm going to have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
I'm going to, so what are you looking for? 100% cotton? Are you open to using some, model or something like that, which makes really cool t-shirts? And there's some new stuff out there you probably want to look at, you might not be aware of. So if even someone who's got their nose in the market like you do big time, things come out so rapidly,
right,
that when you're looking for something and somebody offers you, so here's something new, take a look at it, because it might be something special. You just, new things come into the marketplace all the time.
Yeah. All right. And I'll share mine, and I'm going to put you on the spot, but what's the one thing that you hear over and over that automatically tells you, like, this person's green, they don't know what they're doing, or like they need to do more research?
I would say green isn't bad in itself. Everybody starts out green. I would say this, that it's great to come into this with an idea, some end goal, and what you think you could sell, which is really important. However, have your ears open, because you're going to run into somebody like me, or you're going to run into somebody like Anna, who knows a lot about this, and who does it professionally every day, and has been doing it for decades. And like I know a little bit about Anna, and that she was a store buyer. She was a tailor, worked with tailors and stuff. I mean, she didn't get here by accident. I grew up in the business. I've been doing this for a shocking amount of years. And so, I would suggest that be ready to, even though you've got a good idea and you want to get that across to people, try to do it in a concise way. be ready to listen, because I think there are people you're going to run into if you're looking around that can be very helpful. One other thing that I just want to mention, I think a non-starter is to try to Google the information. As much as business people like Anna and I try to have social media presence, and we do, if you Google looking for wholesale fabric, the first thing that's going to come up is going to be Joann Fabrics, and then Target, Walmart. I mean, you're not going to get to the right guys until about page 4. And so I would say that you want to try to find possibly other people who are making garments, see who they're looking at. Once you get to, there's a handful of reps that do this. There's 3 or 4 of us. There aren't many more than that. And I actually think that meeting someone like Anna is a good break, because she knows how to do this. She's done it a bunch of times. There are other developers. Some are really wonderful like Anna, and some maybe not, but so sometimes developers can help you, and can help you with the sourcing side of it, or a contractor can. But you want to get to someone that, again, if it's got to have continuity, real wholesale pricing, and quality. If it doesn't have those 3 things, move on to the next thing.
Yeah. I would say I guess it would be a pet peeve is when they come and they're like, I'm going to make t-shirts because I found this favorite t-shirt and it's 90% cotton, 5% rayon, 2% spandex, and 1% poly. And
I need that exact fabric, right?
This fabric.
I just had it. So this morning, I have somebody who's making scrubs.
Yeah.
And I sent them a terrific fabric. I really like it a lot. It is 55% polyester and 42% cotton, and it's got some spandex, and it's got a brush surface. It's really great, wrinkle free. Can take a high temperature wash if you want industrial things. And they said, boy, we wish it had a little more polyester or something like that. And I thought, oh my goodness, you don't get to just dial it up and back. But it's, listen, it's great to have ideas, and to come in with those ideas is terrific. But I would be open to listening to what's available and realizing there's a closed set of fabrics. It's a much bigger set than it used to be. If you don't find it with me, there's
like the hand is much more important than the exact content.
Absolutely. I think it's a business when you get down the road a little ways, you're not looking at the weight anymore. You're not looking at you're touching it. That's what you're doing. And you can tell a lot from that once you're experienced, but you got to get to the point where you are experienced. Best way to do that is to get a bunch of color cards, touch them, look at what they are. Oh, that's what satin feels like. Oh, that's what Oxford feels like. And you can give yourself a little bit of a self lesson that way.
Perfect. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much, Jay. How can we find you? How can we get in contact with you? Tell us all that good information.
Okay. Well, I am Jay Arbetman. You can reach me at 708-386-8586, or you can text me at 708-351-7278, or you can write Jay, at thesourcingdistrict.com, or you can go to thesourcingdistrict.com and just use the contact page. All of those things work. If you yell out the window loud enough, I'll probably hear you.
I love that Jay gives out a cell phone number. You've always done that, just publicly, everyone.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. This will live forever on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook. So if you missed it, you want to start over, you want to share it, send it to a friend, it will always be there. And thank you so much again, Jay, and we will see you next time.
Thank you, Anna.
You're welcome.